Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 13 of Down to the Wire. I'm the Shark alongside the Breadstick. And today we are having our third special guest featuring my little brother, Nash Arredondo. Nash, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. Vibes are high. Everything's nice.
I like it. So, honestly, give you tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit of your basketball experience and knowledge.
Well, um, I like basketball. It's my favorite sport. No, favorite player, James Harden, in the Brooklyn Nets. In my basketball experience, I've played since I was 5 years old, so I have quite the knowledge, as I would say.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
So, since you just said that you're a James Harden fan,
Yes.
I think it's time for me to ask the question that's the most commonly thing talked about on our channel. Is what are your thoughts on the James Harden trade?
I mean, it has pros and cons. Like him leaving Houston, it could give him a better possibility of a championship, but the whole mess up with only not passing and dribbling too much, that all changed in Brooklyn. Really developed his game, and I feel like Brooklyn's a good fit for him, and he will develop over time there.
Wow. So my follow up question for you, Nash, is honestly, with the Nets with Kyrie, Harden, and Durant. Do you think? I mean, honestly, right now they're making it work, but do you think that is going to work in the playoffs? Why or why not?
I think it will because all three players are dominant right now. They're honestly all in their prime. KD, can shoot over anyone, attack the basket. He's all around, kind of like a Giannis type, but not really. Um, Kyrie Irving, he's got the sick dribble moves. He'll cross you up. And then we got James Harden, offensive god. Doesn't really play defense, but that's okay because he has KD. Kyrie play defense. Also DeAndre Jordan on the defensive side. And then I think it will because with those three types, you could really make things happen as they're doing right now. Even though they are on a 3 game losing streak, very average, they need to turn it up real quick.
Oh man, that's good. Some good stuff, Gabe. I mean, we just heard from Nash, and obviously you have your own share of feelings from the Nets, but we're head over to Gabe's side with the Warriors. So right now they're the eighth seed. What do they need to do in order to get in towards the top four?
So yeah, at the beginning of the season, I did predict that the Warriors were gonna get top four. We're 8 seed right now, trying to work our way up. I think I think what Steve Kerr is really trying to do right now is just trying to figure out what's the best thing for the playoffs. Like I know I said I want a top four, and I'm just kind of really saying that because if we get top four, that's gonna be Curry's best argument for him being an MVP candidate, if not getting the award. But that's just me being biased towards that. But I think what Steve Kerr and the Warriors are trying to do right now is that they're just trying to find what's the best fit for all the pieces that they have. Um, Taking away from or adding KD took away their big ball movement type offense because you had to put the ball in his hands. So after KD left, we had Clay hurt, Steph hurt, and Draymond not carrying. So then we weren't able to keep or bring back that ball movement era of basketball. But now we have Steph Curry back. We have a pretty good center in James Wiseman. Um, we have pieces like Andrew Wiggins and Kelly Oubre, who should, once Klay Thompson gets back next year, should develop well. I think this year is more of a not a championship run like year for us. I think it's more of a let's see what we can do with what pieces that we have and see where we can go with it this year. So then once Klay Thompson does come back next year, we are on a better streak and then we can implement him into whatever we decide works. Because bringing in Kelly Oubre, who had a phenomenal shooting year last year, is kind of supposed to be that key piece that Klay Thompson is. But without Klay Thompson being here, this is like the next best thing that we have. So then we can kind of experiment around with that and see what happens. Because Steph Curry, the way he plays, he can play both ball dominant and non-ball dominant. So I think that they're trying to figure out what's the best thing to implement all the pieces that we have in order to go on to a strong championship run in the next few years.
I like it. I like it. Good things. So obviously, if the playoffs start today, because the eighth seed does have to play a number one seed. So, Gabe, my question to you is that do you think the Warriors could beat the Jazz in the first round?
It
That would,
depends. It really depends on what can happen because the Warriors did play the Jazz earlier this year and they got spanked. But Kelly Oubre has been getting better at shooting, and I think Steph Curry will realize that he needs to crank it up for the playoffs, and I think he would be able to do that. Draymond Green is probably gonna feel a little bit more because there's a big difference when you can see playoff Draymond versus non-playoff Draymond. There's a big difference. You can definitely tell. The only real issues I think would be is how would our bench work? Because our bench is still pretty young, and also that like there's a lot of people that haven't really made the playoffs. The only really people that I can say from our lineup that have made the playoffs have been on the Warriors for the last 5 or 6 years. So it's kind of hard to tell. I think with the Jazz, how they are playing right now, it's phenomenal. I think it would go down to like a game 6 or 7 coming out. The Jazz would come out, but I think the Warriors do have a great chance in that. Um, just depending on what happens with Steve Kerr's lineup choices, how each person fits in the playoffs, and what the Warriors' overall game plan is for the playoffs. If we were championship running, I think Steve Kerr would create a good plan for us to get through maybe second round or third round. Probably not finals because I feel like that it's gonna be hard to beat the teams like the Lakers and the Clippers without Klay Thompson. Um, but I think if Steve Kerr really devised a plan, Steph Curry stepped it up, Draymond stepped it up, and everybody else fit well into the system that Steve Kerr has developed for the playoffs, I think um, a first round exit is not necessarily impossible. As well, it's not impossible for them to get past the first round. But just if we're talking about just right now how they're playing, I would say game 6 or 7 probably would go to the Jazz.
all right, I like that. Good stuff. Interesting take. But all right, let's head back over to the Nets side. So Nash, I mean, right now the Nets are third seed, and if they were playoff start today, they would play the Pacers. So Nash, in your opinion, do you think how far do you think the Nets will go
Are you talking playoff wise or in that same series?
playoff wise?
I think they could go to the finals if they really wanted to. I know it's a bold statement, could be really controversial, but if all of their players went playoff mode, like I know that, like I know the big three can, they they can totally make it and get Harden's first ring. You know, Kyrie can get really clutch in the playoffs. KD just turns on killer mode, and Harden, he's just Harden. He doesn't really. We haven't seen him go all that far in the playoffs yet, so you can't tell what he's like in the finals or anything like that. But I know he's a valuable piece of that team, and the Nets have not been nothing. They have not been this good without Harden, with that piece added to the team. But I think if they were to play the Pacers, clean sweep, not even a chance.
I don't know about a sweep. It depends if Careless LeVert is gonna play or not. Because if we're starting now, Careless LeVert is not playing. But if he were to play, I don't think it would be a sweep. And you also have to give the fact that we have to think about Harden's not the first option anymore. They've made it to the Western Conference Finals with him being the first option, but he's not the first option anymore. I think he would be second option to KD. Kyrie, you said Kyrie's been clutch his entire career. He hasn't really been clutch in the playoffs since 2016 because he hit that shot. I just hope you know that.
That's kind of what I meant. He saved the Cavaliers in there, but if the Pacers were to have series, at max 2 games, at max.
Wow.
At max 2 games.
Interesting. Wow. Bold statements. But now my next question is so I'm actually going to backtrack a little bit. So in 2018, the year the Rockets and the Warriors went to the conference finals with Chris Paul and James Harden versus Curry, Durant, and Clay. So, and obviously that game went to 7 games. and then the Warriors end up beating them. Nash, do you personally think that if Chris Paul was healthy throughout the entire series, do you think that was their year to beat the Warriors?
I personally think so. He had that little ankle injury, I think it was. Got injured, kind of shook him a little bit. He fought through it, but it just wasn't him the first 3 games. So it wasn't him throughout that whole playoffs. But I was at that game 7, as you know, Dalton. I experienced it. Tough loss, Curry, 0 points in the first half, 30 plus in the second half.
Wrong playoff series, bud.
Sorry.
That was the 2019 series. We're talking about 2018 when Chris Paul in game 6 he went out with an ankle injury and the Warriors came back to win it in 7 and they played the Cavs in the finals.
Oh yes. Okay, yeah, I clocked back there. That's my fault. But
are we really counting this guy as liable if he mixed up 2 completely different series?
Bro, you're expecting me to be an NBA knowledge dictionary like my brother.
That's kind of what this show is about.
I didn't say.
Hey, you told me to be on, so it's your fault. But either way, still the way I think about it, Chris Paul, if he was there, they would have won it. Only because of how solid they were playing that whole playoffs.
Yeah. Okay. Gabe?
You agree?
He never said he agreed. He just said okay.
I know. But,
All right, Gabe.
Am I getting the same question?
Yes.
Okay. So I think ultimately, I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened because again, that's a big scenario question. I look at all of these like big what if questions, and there's got to be a bunch of different things that play out because I think Game 6 was way too far into advance where the Warriors were already winning, where that wouldn't have mattered. So it's basically if he played into Game 7, would he have made it? But would he have made it to the finals? But you have to look at everything that could have happened in that Game 7 because if it was just a Game 7 versus or just 2 teams versus 2 teams, on paper, the Rockets look so much better. That season specifically, the Rockets look so much better. That's why they finished the 1 seed over the 2 seed for the Warriors. But you also have to give the fact that when the Warriors are down with their key players, they are not losing games. In that 2016 season, whenever they weren't down players against the Thunder, they didn't lose any games whenever they were super super down. Now, granted, they were down against the Raptors in the 2019 finals, but they had players down. They became tied with the Cavs in the 2016 finals, but they had Andrew Bogut out. Because Andrew Bogut is a great defensive help, and Draymond Green was out for Game 5. That's 2 key players on that roster that helped create that championship run. So I think it ultimately would depend on what would happen in that Game 7, because you can't just say if one person there is, yeah, we're going to win, but you don't know how each player is going to play and how each player is feeling. Because even if, let's say, like I said, I don't think that Game 6 would have really mattered if Chris Paul went out, because I think it was more in the Warriors' hands. But if you look at what each team is going for, the Rockets have a strong urge to get to the finals. James Harden finally won his first MVP. Curry, Durant are trying to make this really good dream team. So you have to look at every single piece and put it into play. I think it would really depend on how each player played in that Game 6 or in that Game 7, because that would determine if they would have won, because each team had a vengeance about something. And what I really like is that because if you remember in the 2019 playoffs, whenever they met in the semi-conference, KD went out in Game 5.
Yep.
And I was listening the other day to an interview on First Take with Austin Rivers, who was a part of that 2019 team, and they said that what makes the Warriors so great is that they know how to play in big moments like that, and they won't let you take games from them. If they need that game, they will take it from you. And I think you have to always look at the Warriors as a great, great team who was hard to beat when they are down. When they are down games and they have all their players, they are hard to beat. Because, again, like I've been saying, Steve Kerr will figure out a plan for that well-rounded Warriors team to grab Game 7 and go to the finals and win the finals like they did. But I think that it would depend on how Game 7 would play. Because what was probably going in Steve Kerr's mind at that time was he was trying to figure out how to stop James Harden, not James Harden and Chris Paul, because Chris Paul was out. So that's why I think it would depend on how each thing would have played out. I can see scenarios for both teams coming out, but I think ultimately you just have to look at each thing and see what would happen there, what would happen there. That's why I really don't like what if questions, because I think it can go either way. Whatever you are ultimately thinking is the way you're gonna say it's gonna play out. Like, let's say, like like I said, what if Draymond Green didn't get injured in Draymond didn't get pulled out Game 5, Andrew Bogut didn't get injured in Game 5? I think they would have won. I think they would have won that series, and Golden State would have 4 rings. But we don't know that because it didn't play out that way, and there could have been different factors that kept them from winning that ring. So I think that it could have gone either way, no matter what. But I think with that specific series, you can't ask the question, what if Chris Paul was not injured? Would they have gone to the finals? Given there's so many different circumstances that could have happened in between to keep them from going to the finals if Chris Paul even wasn't injured.
Like that. And now for my final question, and then we'll call it. Ash, would you rather have prime Curry or prime James Harden? And why or why not?
All right. I'm going to my guy Gabe here. So, I like James Harden, favorite player, but prime Curry. I mean, he was going crazy. I mean, with the threes he was making, the plays he was making, I mean, the team around him, he just had it going, and he was on fire. I mean, he's still in his prime, I'd say, because right now he's doing really good this season. Around a team that he's kind of not necessarily familiar with. Got rookies on the team, made some trades this offseason, and he doesn't have a splash brother to play, and he hasn't had him for the past 2 seasons, and that has hurt the Warriors team a lot. But I would say, even though Harden in his prime, the step back move, crazy, making playoffs every year, had Westbrook around him, had Chris Paul around him, couldn't win. I mean, that's another factor. Like, he couldn't win and go to the finals and win, but Curry could. He did it with KD, and Klay Thompson, and prime Curry's just overall better statistic-wise. Even though Harden was averaging more points, Curry overall was better in prime.
Interesting take. Now, Gabe, you already know what I'm about to ask you. The same question I asked Nash.
Alright, so when people look at sports in the whole world and comparing different players, they look at accolades and stats and other aspects of the game, right? So I think with this question of which player I would rather have, I look at the whole aspect of which player would I want to have and start a team with. Because obviously basketball is a 5-on-5 sport, not a 1-on-1 sport, or else then you would go with James Harden, who is arguably the best offensive player in the league. Because 1-on-1, he doesn't have to rely on his teammates to pass to and to get open shots and get easy shots. He just has to play someone 1-on-1 and get to the basket or make a 3. So, in that aspect, I would go James Harden. Because Steph Curry, defense-wise, is kind of a liability. But if we're talking about the team aspect of basketball, I'd go Curry, and here's why. Curry has proved that he can be a great leader and a great mentor to young players and to everyone around him. James Harden has not been able to do that. James Harden has not been able to take his team and say, you know what, we're going to work hard every day and get to the championship and win a championship. He has run through a D'Antoni system where it requires him to have the ball in his hands 95% of the time. And if maybe his teammates are open, pass to his teammates for an open 3. That's what I really saw out of James Harden the last 3 to 4 years on the Rockets with PJ Tucker, Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon. Really just passed it off to those guys for a 3 if they were open. If not, dribble, step back 3. Steph Curry is a player that has a bunch of different talents, and it has proven that his talents work because he's been able to get so many records. He's been able to get a bunch of different awards and accolades and championships. It's shown that with what he has built around him, because if you think about it, that 2015-2016 Warriors team, both years, were not really, besides Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston, were not really given to him like a super team, right? Most of those pieces were draft picks. Curry was a draft pick. Klay Thompson was a draft pick. Draymond Green was a draft pick. Harrison Barnes was a draft pick. Yes, they might have got players like David Lee, Andrew Bogut, like that. But if you really think about it, they built that team, and Steph Curry led that team to a championship. A young team, everybody 25, 26 around that age, to a championship. Harden, his entire career from Houston to now, because I don't count his Thunder years as him being as prime because he was a sixth man and didn't really have the ball in his hands as much. But he didn't really take Houston wherever, and he's had the 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed, multiple high seed teams that should probably go to the playoff or to go to the finals, like that Rockets team with Chris Paul, that 2018. Like on paper, on statistics, they probably should have went and maybe even won. But they didn't, because I feel like that Harden, in the biggest moments of his career where they need him most in those big games, does not show up. And he doesn't bring his team up with him. And I think that makes the big difference between him and Curry is Curry is a better overall leader than James Harden is. And I would rather have that on my team. Because let's say this. Let's take it back to football for a second. We did this in our coaches episode. If you had to give me Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, who would you want? Most of the time, people would go Tom Brady. Why? Because he has the 7 rings. He has the multiple playoff wins. But Tom Brady, what makes him a great quarterback is not his ability to throw the ball down the field. It's not his mobility to get out of sacks. It's his leadership and mentality to win games. That's what makes him great. Aaron Rodgers, don't get me wrong, is a great leader and a great overall athlete. Probably a better quarterback. Better overall, not overall, but better athletic quarterback than Tom Brady is. Tom Brady just has that build. He had to develop his game over the time to be a great quarterback. But what made him so great is that he was able to drive his team late in games and win games. And bring his team to championships. Like Curry can. And LeBron can. Like Aaron Rodgers, I'd compare him to like a Giannis. Good regular season team, but can't get out of the playoffs. Wins MVPs, but can't get out of the playoffs to a Super Bowl to win the Super Bowl. He's done it once. Giannis has done it 0 times. I think that's a great comparison because both of these players are great at their position, arguably the best at their position. Once it's said and done, with all of these older players out, Giannis is the best power forward, small forward. People are saying he could be the best player in the league if he gets a jump shot because he's that unstoppable in the paint. So, and Aaron Rodgers right now, arguably the best quarterback of all time, better than Patrick Mahomes, better than Russell Wilson. But these two players can't get out of the playoffs. Why? Because their mentality and their leadership is not as great as these other great players. And I think that's what makes the difference between Curry and Harden is Curry has that mentality and that leadership to take his team somewhere else rather than Harden hasn't. Because, like I said, Harden being the number one option and the Nets will not take them anywhere. And it's hard to see KD there too, but KD has had that experience where he's the number one option, and it was fine with him because he was 1A, 1B with Russell Westbrook. I don't think it was a 1 and a 2. I think it was a 1A, 1B. Kyrie Irving, everywhere he's went, he's been a 2 option or a 1 option, and he's been hated for being the 1 option. James Harden has been the 1 option for 8 years. And and it went nowhere. Curry has been the 1 option his entire life. Everywhere he's gone, basically, he's been the one option. I can argue that he's been the one option against even with Kevin Durant on his team, just because he's a better leader than Kevin Durant ever was. Yes, maybe in the biggest moments of the game, you would put the hand in KD's hands, or put the ball in KD's hands, because he can make those big shots because he's unstoppable from that range. He's arguably another greatest offensive player in the league. But to really drive and leave your team, it's got to be Curry. In recent in interviews, whenever KD was asked if he was going to leave Golden State, and why he left Golden State, was because he didn't get as much recognition as Curry. You want to know why? Because it's Curry's team. Curry was there first. Curry knows how to lead that team to a championship. That's why whenever I look at the MVP award for the finals, it's hard to say when Curry can get it or not. Because I think if it was going to the best, if it's not going by stats, it would go to Curry every single time. I think the league is looking for stats and ratings. I think that's the biggest thing. Why do you think Luka is still somehow in the talks whenever his team is the 14th seed? Or he was the 14th seed for like maybe 2 days ago, but is averaging a triple-double because of stats. And him himself has said, I am not playing well. And Stephen A. Smith looked at him, you're almost averaging a triple-double. How are you not playing well? Well, because he's not getting his team out of that bad position. You have to get your teams out of that bad position in order to be a great player. But the NBA doesn't look for stats. I mean, it looks for stats more than it looks for the overall aspect of a player. But with my team, I'd rather start with the overall aspects of the player. And Curry has shown me more that he is a better player to build around than James Harden has.
Yeah, I agree with that statement for sure. Well, it looks like we're running out of time here. We just want to thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching us, for watching this video. Make sure you check out my little brother and his YouTube channel. We'll leave it down in the description. For last time for now, I'm the Shark, alongside the Red Stick and my little brother Nash Arredondo. We'll see you next time. Peace.